America took its first steps towards racial education in 1954 for the Supreme Court to print segregated schools unconstitutional. But Americans' attitudes towards their black brothers were far from friendly. Blacks still found themselves far from swimming pools and other fancy places. The revolution finally sparked on December 1st, 1955. While riding the public bus on her way home from work, Rosa Parks and 3 other men were asked to give up their seat for a white man who had just entered the bus. At that moment, white people and colored people were not allowed to occupy the same row, but Rosa Parks still refused to give up her seat and was arrested. 5 days later, on December 5th, she was charged with a $10 fine for violating the bus segregation laws. Shortly after her arrest, Joanne Robinson, who was a part of the African American Civil Rights Association, sent out a flyer encouraging a bus boycott to begin. The bus manager said that 90% of the black population soon refused to ride the public bus as a way of protesting for Rosa Parks' arrest.
Let me ask this question. What do colored people now hope to gain by pressing the segregation fight at this time? What immediate results do you hope to achieve?
Well, we hope to achieve equal rights as any human being deserves. That's what we're working for.
What do you think the prospects are for achieving that goal?
I think we'll be successful if we continue.
How long do you think it would take?
I have no idea how long.
Rosa Parks was released out of jail with the help of Ed Nixon, who was a black leader of the African American Civil Rights Association. He also played a big role in the organization of the bus boycott. In a recent interview, Rosa Parks described how things occurred in the bus the day she got arrested.
Well, I was arrested on December 1st, 1955 for refusing to stand up on the orders of the bus driver after the white seats had been occupied in the front. And of course I was not in the front of the bus as many people have written and spoken that I was, that I got on the bus and took a front seat, but I did not. I took a seat that was just back of where the white people were sitting. And in fact, the last seat, and the man was next to the window, and I took an aisle seat, and there were 2 women across. And we went on undisturbed until about the second or third stop when some white people boarded the bus and left one man standing. And when the driver noticed him standing, he told us to stand up and let him have those seats. He referred to them as front seats. And when the other 3 people, after some hesitancy, stood up, he wanted to know if I was going to stand. I told him I was not, and he told me he would have me arrested. And I told him he may do that.
The Montgomery Improvement Association, also known as the MIA, was impressed with the success of the boycott, so they made an anonymous vote for the boycott to continue. Martin Luther King was announced president of the MIA. He said that the boycott would only work if more than half of the black population participated. The boycott gained a lot of support. Many black cab drivers were helping by charging 10 cents like public buses did. Officers tried stopping this by announcing that if any taxi drivers were caught charging less than 45 cents, they would have to accept the consequences and be arrested. The MIA then started to make their own private taxi plan. Blacks who owned cars helped each other by carpooling. Some churches even brought cars to aid the taxi services. During the bus boycott, Martin Luther King made an announcement explaining why the bus boycott was taking place.
For a number of years, the Negro passengers on the city bus lines of Montgomery have been humiliated, intimidated, and faced threats on this bus line. Just the other day, one of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger. Mrs. Rosa Parks was arrested and taken down to jail, taken from the bus, just because she refused to give up her seat. At present, we are in the midst of a protest, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, representing some 44% of the population. 90% at least of the regular Negro bus passengers are staying off the buses, and we plan to continue until something is done.
The Montgomery Bus Boycott supporters' demands were simple. They were asking for black passengers to be treated with courtesy, for seating to be given on a first-come, first-served basis, with white passengers sitting from front to back and colored passengers sitting from back to front, as well as for African American drivers to drive routes that primarily serviced African Americans as well. During the bus boycott, the violence increased. 4 churches were bombed, sometimes killing the people who were inside at the moment. 88 people, including Martin Luther King, were arrested on February 21st and ordered to pay $500 in fines for organizing the boycott. Martin Luther King's house was bombed on January 30th, 1956. Insurance would withdraw their insurance on vehicles that supported the boycott, for example, cabs. Cabs were usually stopped for minor traffic violations and would usually end up with their driver being sent to jail. The case ended being 2-1 in favor of integration. Finally, on November 13, 1956, segregation on buses became unconstitutional. The black community started using the buses again on December 21, 1956, but some of the arguments that were used against integration in court actually happened. Buses were shot at, 4 churches were bombed, and Martin Luther King's home was bombed. The men who were suspects of committing these crimes were found innocent. Although many horrible things occurred during and after the bus boycott, the violence ended eventually. The 381 days bus boycott was a success. It was a turning point in the movement for African American civil rights, and it was the turning point for the segregation laws on buses.